Hey everybody, welcome back to the Badgerland Birding Podcast, bringing you birding news from the Badger State and beyond. Today we're with my friend Garrett Rhyne from the American Bird Conservancy, and we actually met down in Louisiana when he was doing some Swainson's warbler research. So I got to go out and band a swain. Well, I guess we were just checking up on him, check up on a Swainson's warbler, and made a video on the channel if anyone wants to check it out. But it was a lot of fun, so I'm excited to hear about what he's working on today. How's it going, Garrett?
It's going great. How are you doing?
Doing well. You wanna let's go all the way back to the beginning first. Like, how did you get involved with birds and all that in the first place?
Oh man, great question. So, I grew up in North Carolina and I just love the outdoors. I feel like a lot of us just love the outdoors. But honestly, I didn't get into birds until I was in college. I knew I wanted to do like wildlife conservation, so I went to Virginia Tech for my undergrad. I actually started working in rivers.
Mhm.
I did a lot of freshwater mussel work and freshwater fish. I feel like we talked about that back when we were in Louisiana because I know you were doing a lot of fishery stuff,
Yeah,
and
fish are great, man.
fish are great.
Yeah.
I miss being in the river sometime. But yeah, and then I really enjoyed what I was doing, but I think it was a few times being on the river and starting to notice my birds and seeing like prothonotary warblers cross the river in Southern Virginia, and I was just like, man, I've got an itch to try something new, and I sort of jumped, fully into it and started working for the Virginia Breeding Bird Atlas. I studied my birds hard to get kind of this tech job. Um, because like I said, I just wanted to, really try something new, and birds just really interested me. And yeah, I just kind of went all in and haven't looked back since. And so yeah, I did a lot of research. Did a lot of point counts, tech jobs for a while, going through the rest of college and right out of college. Did some really fun jobs out west because I'm born and raised on the East Coast, so I went out to Montana and worked for a bit, studying sagebrush, songbirds. I
That's cool.
banded.
Sagebrush is a really cool habitat.
It really
Underrated in my opinion. Yeah.
Very underrated. Yeah, I really enjoyed that one. And I have not been out back since. I definitely want to get back out there. And then I just hopped over to Idaho to band saw-whets and flammulated
That's
owls.
cool.
That was a really fun job living up on top of a mountain at Lucky Peak. And then did other mixed jobs of habitat management, did some prescribed burning stuff in North Carolina. And then I found myself in Louisiana to do my master's studying Swainson's where we met.
Yeah, and I think the Swainson's warbler is a big, bucket list bird for a lot of people where they're so hard to see. And even the habitats where we were looking, there were a lot of them in there, but a lot of the times you would just hear them and it was so thick and hard to get around in there. That must have been a really cool bird to work on just because not a lot of people get to see them, let alone in the hand and really enjoy them the way you did.
Yeah, I mean it's a very special species to me because I actually started working with them in the Southern Appalachians, and most people kind of associate Swainson's warblers with the coastal plains, the lower Gulf Coast, think of like canebrakes and bottomland hardwood forests, but there's really, really dense populations in the Southern Appalachians, and they occupy just as dense a habitat. So they occupy like rhododendron and mountain laurel thickets. It's called rhododendron hells. I did some research with them in my undergrad, and I decided to hate myself and do these off-road point counts where I'd bushwhack a mile through rhododendron forest to do point counts and find Swainson's warblers. It worked. I found a lot. It was really cool. And gave me a much bigger appreciation.
Garrett's Wi-Fi gave out, so we switched locations and then we were right back. I think you're talking about your appreciation for Swainson's.
Yeah, it's just I think it's appreciated by birders once they get to know what it is. That's a species that everyone wants one of those on their checklist, right? But I think beginning birders may not appreciate it as much. Um, but it's something very special to have in the hand. It's something very special to see and work with so up close, and kind of you grow like a reverence for your study species. You can ask any
100%.
researcher.
Yeah.
No, once they study something for X number of years, it's like a part of you, which sounds cheesy, but it is. It's just it's a species that's really close to your heart. And I actually had one. I had that as a yard bird. I was in my previous apartment. I'm here in Athens, Georgia. I actually had one out my back window singing all summer, and
That's cool.
it was pretty sweet. It was like the only spot in Athens that reliably gets them too. Was my backyard.
That's sweet. They probably knew. They're like, that's the guy that studied us.
I know. That's what I hoped.
Your
That's what
study
I.
species either hates you or loves you. There's no in between. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I think it helps them because they're a warbler. People see the other colorful warblers and they're like, oh, Swainson's too. Like, I got to see that one. I feel like some of the sparrows get a bad rap. I remember we were birding with Arjen Dwarshuis, the guy who's the global big ear record in Arizona, and he got his life for botery sparrow. And
That's a pretty plain
yeah, and
sparrow.
he was like, I like it. It's a real birder's bird, although it is quite drab. And I was like, yeah, yeah, it is
That's
quite
that's a
drab.
that's a birder's bird. Yeah. I and actually, man, I feel like that's something that I've kind of grown to love more is sparrows as of late. I don't know why, but maybe it's just because I've got some in my
You're
backyard.
getting older. It's just the thing.
Yeah.
As you get older, you appreciate them more.
See, I guess so. It must be. I don't know what it is, but you just appreciate the more common species and you appreciate the duller species now that the young and flashy stage of life is gone, you know. You don't need the bright colors anymore. You want the, you
So
know.
you go to like Ecuador and you're like, ah, this is pretty cool.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you were doing with the warblers down in Louisiana, what you learned from that.
Yeah, so my project, my master's project was one that sort of I came up with the idea with the help of some friends, and I pitched it to my what would then become advisor Phil Stouffer down at LSU, and it was essentially to replicate a project to use geolocators to track Swainson's warblers. So there had always been a handful of studies that studied, prothonotary warblers, oven birds, some wood thrush, and it's sort of a study of, you want to be able to sample across different populations and you're tracking them to figure out where all these different populations are going. So what my question was, where do all these different breeding populations of Swainson's warblers go for the winter? Um, and it's very important for us to know where different populations go. Are they staying together in the winter? Are they going to different places? Because if they are going to different places, that can have a profound effect on how we conserve them. So my example is always golden wing warblers. A researcher named Gunnar Kramer was like sort of my inspiration for my project. He studied golden wing warblers. The Appalachian population of golden wings were declining. They could not figure out why. The Great Lakes population was actually doing just fine. And as they tried to make more and more breeding habitat in the Appalachians, and just nothing was working, and they could not figure out why until they tracked them. And the Great Lakes populations go to Costa Rica, where in Panama, where there's a lot more conservation, a lot more land protection, a lot of ecotourism. And then the Appalachian population went to northern Colombia, where
Mm.
there is a much higher rate of deforestation and habitat loss. And so they found like that is the reason they're not surviving the winter. And that sort of study showed everyone, oh, it's important. We need to track birds. We need to know where these populations go. It's not just enough to use something like eBird data where you look at a checklist, hey, there's a Swainson's warbler here at this time of year. But if we don't know where it came from or where it's going, there's a lot of unknowns. So that was my plan was to just I brought together a whole bunch of collaborators from 6 different states, and we all went in 2021 to deploy geolocators, which are tiny trackers, to figure out where they went and what was their migratory routes and stuff. And yeah,
So where did they go?
great question. They had sort of a split in migration, and one that we were almost expecting, and one that is seen in a lot of species. So the breeding birds of the Appalachian Mountains and of like the coastal plains of like South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, they all fly through the peninsula of Florida, and they spend the winter in Cuba and the Bahamas and probably Jamaica as well. And then birds from the west, so the birds like I was tagging in Louisiana, and then further north, all the way up to like the Missouri Ozarks, they fly straight across the Gulf of Mexico and winter in different places around the Yucatan Peninsula, all the way into Guatemala. So it's very distinct, sort of two different flyways. Um, and that means, again, these different populations are experiencing completely different environments, conditions, weather events, you name it. They're experiencing completely different environments. And so now we know that. And of course, we are also able to um, figure out what migratory routes they take. So knowing that they cross the Gulf of Mexico is pretty huge because, there's a lot of species that go straight across. Some of them go around the Gulf, like around Texas. Um, but it's still always incredible to remind ourselves that birds are flying straight across in one big belt from Louisiana or Mississippi and Alabama to the Yucatan of Mexico. It's still kind of blows my mind that birds can do that.
Yeah, so that was all stuff we didn't really know before, huh? Like we just kind of had some idea, but now we have more definitive.
Yeah, exactly. There had been some studies that had tracked some birds from Jamaica and Louisiana, and it sort of gave us that's why we, sort of predicted what we did,
Mhm.
but no one had really sampled all these different populations. And I would say it's still not even definitive, right? We still had a total sample size of 31 tags because we used what were called geolocators, which I already mentioned. And they're not like GPS units. They are basically recording some sort of environmental component, whether that be light. In this case, we got to use these brand new geolocators that recorded atmospheric pressure.
Mhm.
And basically, instead of like a GPS that gets a satellite fix, you take a year's worth of data that's recorded on that device, and then you can run it through a bunch of fancy analyses and figure out sort of a latitude, longitude estimate, and figure out where it went in its migratory route. And these new ones that we got to try out, uh, basically, there's a whole new analysis with it that allowed us to get much more refined movements. It used to be like, oh yeah, if based on light data, we know that these birds wintered somewhere in Central America in general. But now we could get it down to like 10 to 30 kilometer radius, which is a lot better. And we know kind of where it's stopping over and how long they're flying for and all this other pretty incredible information that we had no idea about before.
Yeah, like actual thing, like say you had like an Apple AirTag that
Mhm.
you could hypothetically put on a bird. Is the reason you guys can't do that because of the cost, or is it because of the size that it would take? It would weigh the bird down too much?
Yeah, it's a little bit of it's several factors, right? So the first thing is weight. We can only put some sort of device on a bird that is no more than 5%, but we typically aim for less than 3% of the bird's body weight. So if we're talking about a Swainson's warbler, they weigh about 15 grams. So we have to use something that is less than like zero point 0.7 grams. And so the technology that we have to use is pretty limited for small birds. And that's sort of what I've kind of found my niches in is the small technologies
Mhm.
rather than just, because we can put these really nice GPS satellite tags on larger birds. There's a red-tailed hawk project that produces this really, really incredible data from much bigger, bulkier tags that weigh, 3 to 5 grams. Um, but those can also cost like $1,300 a tag or $2,000 a tag, whereas these geolocators, they are really tiny, and they cost around $250 a tag, which still sounds like a lot.
Yeah,
I,
yeah, for sure.
but a lot more economic than $1,000 a tag.
So is that able to transmit the data to you, or do you need to recapture the bird?
That is the tricky part with geolocators is that it records all the data, but it can't send anything back. That's what requires sort of a big battery. So these tags that are 1.5 grams, 2 grams, they have the ability to send information back. But these small ones, they're what we call archival. So they record everything. And so what that means is that we put the tags on the bird 1 year, we let them go, we cross our fingers, and we have to wait a whole year for the birds to migrate, survive, and come back, and ideally come back to the exact same spot so we can go out, catch them again, and then take the load device off to be able to download the data.
And you had 30 that came back and you were able to, how many did you
31.
put on?
We put out 81 tags and we recovered 31 tags.
Dang.
And
That's wild, like letting one go and be like the $250, you know?
oh yeah,
Here you go.
it was a whole, I tell you, it was a whole year that kept me awake at night of just,
Yeah, like what
my
are they
whole
doing out there?
my
Like it could have a close to all that data and then like get eaten at the last second or something?
my whole master's project riding on these small devices, riding on the fact that these birds have to make it.
Did you
And
check when you caught one? Did you check to make sure it was like really healthy, like the best of the bunch? Like you got to survive, man. You can't be like emaciated or anything.
oh yeah, I mean, ideally, well, so that also kind of limits what we can do with geolocators because ideally, you want to be able to recapture the tag. And in the world of bird tagging, females are very hard to catch and even harder to recapture because they're not the territorial ones. In most songbirds, right? There's exceptions.
Mhm.
But with a lot of the songbirds, especially if we're talking warblers, to be able to get them in the net, it's best to use we use a mist net and we use audio playback. So we find a, territorial male. We use a little bit of playback, and as you saw, if you remember when we were down
Yeah, it
there,
was pretty aggressive. It was
they are
pretty like,
feisty.
yeah.
They're hard to find, but once you're at their habitat and you use playback, which, I know is sort of a sensitive topic for
For
birding in general.
research, I think it's
For
pretty
research, we
pretty
use it
accepted. Yeah.
exactly. So, so it biases a lot of the data because I only have data from males, and I don't know about females. And frankly,
Would assume they
females
would
go are just
probably go to the same place, right?
no.
Theoretic, they could
There's a
cross
lot of
over and
there's been a lot of research done. I know there's some research recently done with black-throated blue warblers where they're going different places, they're leaving at different times because once the breeding season is over, they don't they don't necessarily stay with their mate, right? The males, once breeding season is done and once they're ready to migrate, they want to go acquire a winter territory. So they're gone first. And it's the adult males and then the young males and then maybe the adult females and then the young females. So they're staggered of when they leave and they're staggered of potentially where they go. And so we don't know where female Swainson's warblers go, like in relation to males, right? Like we don't know if they're going to the same spots or if they're taking different routes. I would love to know.
yeah.
But so like I said, so these geolocators, it sort of biases our data just a little bit. Um, and also just again, it's the birds that made it. So we're only knowing where birds are going, where they're surviving. We may not know where birds are going if they're not surviving.
Yeah.
And then also, the healthy birds that return to the exact same spot. So they might have returned, but they're maybe like a kilometer that way. And when you're
Yeah.
scouring the forest of
In
endless
the heat and the
possibilities.
bugs and the thorns and all that. Yeah.
You have no chance if they move 2 kilometers down. Good luck finding them. You have no idea.
Did any of your birds get captured by other people? Or like, any of the locators pop off and somebody found it or anything like that, or they were all just recaptures?
They were all recaptures. Swainson's warbler is one of the very few songbirds that has been banded, and I'm just talking like all banding operations across the Americas where we put a little leg loop band and there's banding stations and whatnot. That is one of the only birds that has never been recaptured at a different site.
Interesting.
Mainly because there's so few banded. There's very few banding stations that catch them.
Yeah.
They're very hard to catch in general. There's not many places that do unless you're target catching them. And then yeah, so there's never been another one. But it is funny. Uh, because the spring as birds were returning and I was expecting to go out in the field, I was looking up checklists of all my field sites because a lot of these were like public areas and parks, and I was looking to see if anyone was taking pictures of them to see if I could because they had little color bands on them as well, and you could probably see the tags sticking out.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I did find someone who had taken a picture of a bird in South Carolina, and that person ended up being one of my collaborators who was working at Cornell, who was like making the analyses for these barometric geolocators. It was the smallest world colliding that they had taken a picture of my bird right before, it was like 2 days before the collaborators there captured it. It was so funny.
That is funny. One of my advisor for undergrad, he was doing a study tagging muskies in a lake in Wisconsin, and so they had trackers on them. And
Mm.
so one day he saw the fish going off grid on land, and he tracked it to somebody's house. Assumingly it's in the guy's freezer or whatever. And he knocks on the door and he's like, "Hey, like, like I think you captured one of our fish. Like, can we get our tracker back?" I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." We just refused. He refused to say anything about it. So I'm just like, "Yep, that's tough." But
That's
that's the world of science and tracking things and all that.
if someone took my Swainson's warbler,
I'd have
I'll
a
never
lot more
know.
questions if someone harvested a Swainson's warbler as opposed to
Yeah.
like a muskie.
Though I will say someone stole my geolocators. We had several deployed in the Great Dismal Swamp of Virginia. They recaptured some the next year, did, like awesome job, and they shipped it back to me because to be able to download the data, you have to have this device and stuff, and so they had to ship it back to me. And of course, I've never had a package stolen, I don't think, in my life. This package, someone had ripped open the package, emptied the contents, and then it was like a month-long investigation. And so I lost an entire field site of data
Dang, that's
because
brutal.
someone probably opened it up, looked at them, had no idea what they were, and threw them away.
Or they're
It was
like, these are really expensive. I'm gonna try to sell these on the black market for a lot of
then
money.
they're worth like nothing at that point. They're like there's this literally just an almost dead battery and like an internal clock and it
You'll
was
see like some other paper come out that just has that data in it. Guy taking credit for
so
your work.
uh,
Well, tell us about the stuff you're doing at ABC now. So this is post Swainson's Warbler stuff.
Yeah, so I was almost gonna like try to tee it up there with talking about geolocators, like right, we talk about, it biases towards males, and we don't know what happens to birds when if they don't return or if they don't survive. So the other technology, primary technology that's used for small birds, for a lot of our, warblers and even a lot of our thrushes and stuff is what's called automated radio telemetry. And that is where we put a radio tag that's sending out a signal with like a unique barcode that says what that bird is. And as the bird migrates, it's sending out that signal, and there's a whole bunch of receivers, stations all across the Americas and even into Europe, and Australia. And as that migrating bird flies by, that signal gets picked up and then sent to a centralized database, and you can connect the dots as the bird moves to know its migratory path and where it's going. And that is what's called the Motus Wildlife Tracking Network. And that is what I work with now. So the flip side of geolocators is that of using this instead of geolocators is that I can put a tag on a bird and I never have to see that bird again. Which means I can put it on females, and that means I can put it on like birds that were just hatched this year that you have no idea if they're going to return. Um, and we still get data from all of our different birds. Yeah, there's Motus.
Yeah, so
Um,
for those that are just listening to audio, we have it pulled up and it's the Motus. You can go to motus.org if you want to explore it. It looks pretty cool. And this is not just birds, right? This is a bunch of things.
Yeah, birds, bats, insects, even rattlesnakes here in the coast of Georgia. This is used for a lot of different things. You know, it's best set up for large scale migration, but it works with a whole range of species, and the tags are small enough that they can be put on things like bats, which bats are on average smaller than most of our birds. Um, so yeah, it takes sort of an old style of radio telemetry, which has been around since like the 1950s and 60s, where you used to go out and you hand tracked a bird and you listen to beeps and on a set of headphones and you're following them around. Well, this basically just sets up a bunch of those stationary receivers so that listens 24/7. So whenever something passes by, it picks it up. And so I guess
That's
I didn't,
cool.
yeah, I guess I didn't really say I'm the Southeast Motus coordinator
Hmm.
for the American Bird Conservancy. So this was a program started by Birds Canada, but the American Bird Conservancy, we've got a staff of four of us that sort of coordinate a lot of the infrastructure, so all these research, all the receiver towers, but also help sort of develop the research and the tagging efforts and everything in between.
So how many towers are there?
Hmm. There's like 2,000
So are they like
stations.
constantly wanting to add more so they get more data points, or is there like a maximum threshold?
Yeah, so the idea is that there will continue to be more and more stations. If you're looking at the map, so yeah, again, if you're listening on podcasts, I guess it's hard to see. But there, you're noticing all those individual circles are different Motus stations all across the Americas. And when you look at like Ontario and the Northeast, you'll see really high density of stations because it started off in in Canada, in Ontario. Um, and so there's a lot more stations there in the Northeast United States. And then it's really has expanded across the rest of the Americas in the past like 2 to 3 years.
It's like
So when I,
Toronto has a bunch of them.
yeah, that's where it started. And
Okay.
a company named Low Tech, who makes a lot of one of the types of tags, is based out of Ontario.
Do
And
these
so
look noticeably different? Like, would you notice one, or does it just look like a regular tower?
they all look different.
Oh,
So
they all look different?
that's sort
Interesting.
of the beauty of it, and what makes it annoying is like if I want a Motus station, I can't just like buy one online and place it out in my front yard. These are pretty big structures typically, because we have to use antennas that have to get up high enough on the landscape that they're listening for 10 to 15 kilometers in each direction that they're facing. And so a lot of times these are big, what we call Rhone towers. These like lattice towers. That's like the go-to look of Motus is these lattice towers with a bunch of antennas on top. But oftentimes I'm just mounting antennas off the sides of like fire towers,
Hmm.
or sometimes I'm on a rooftop. So they all look different, and it's annoying because you have to know what you're doing to set one up. It's not just a plug and play. And so that's sort of my role in the southeast is working with a whole bunch of people. I'm either installing the station or I'm helping folks install the station. I'm helping them figure out where to get all the equipment from, um, all the logistics and stuff like that. So I spend a lot of my time doing that.
Yeah, people that have never seen this before, I feel like you could spend a lot of time just looking at stuff on here.
Oh man, yeah, you
It
can.
kind of reminds me of like Starlink for birds, though. You know, where you have these
Yeah.
things set up and then they can be used in different places.
Yeah. Well, that's the cool thing is that it's all public data, for the most part. Some people decide to hide their data, but that's not really part of the policy that we like at Motus. We want a public facing interface. Here, I'll show you a good one.
Yeah,
So if you scroll on the map, uh, you go down into Georgia. Let's see, what's a good one? Ooh, go up to you see Anderson, South Carolina.
yeah.
Go to that one just to the left of it.
This one?
Yeah, Livonia. So this is a station that I installed. And again, when you first select it, uh, the map looks really crazy
Mm-hmm.
because it's a combination of all the different tracks of the different species. But if you go over to the tab that says species detected on next to info, a little bit higher, yeah, then you can here deselect, uncheck that species detected, and then you can select each box individually. So wood thrush,
Oh, that is
yeah,
cool.
oh
Look
yeah,
at
you can.
that. Is this all the wood thrushes or is this one individual wood
These
thrush?
are all the wood
Okay.
thrushes picked up at this station. So you'll see the number. There's 74 wood thrush picked up, and these are all their full tracks of where they went and where they came from. Um,
Oh, it has the tagging site too, where they were
yeah, yeah,
cool.
where those birds were tagged for the different
Yeah, that's
projects.
neat. You can totally see like some trends about where they were going.
Yeah, yeah, and you can, I mean, you can get down to just looking at the individual. If you hover over, you can choose an individual. I mean, it gets pretty close. Yeah. Um, You'll also notice there are some erroneous um, pathways, and oh, yep, there's one of them.
What is he up
Because
to?
basically there are when there's so many tags on the landscape, sometimes basically there's a miscommunication in the data, and so there's some false positives or aliasing. So we're working on being able to filter out all of that. Most of it's filtered, but sometimes you'll see if if you're looking like I think one of the bird species after wood thrush there was a common tern,
Hmm.
and that's not it wasn't a true tag. And as soon as you see it, it looks like it went all over the United States, and it's like, oh no, no, that it just there's just some data that hasn't been cleaned quite yet because it takes a lot of effort to go through that, which we are, but it's part of it.
Sure. It very much reminds me of like eBird for tracking. I
Oh
guess like
yeah.
iNat, more like iNat for tracking.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at and see where they went. You can see where they're heading for their non-breeding grounds. Yeah, I find it fun because I kind of keep track of all the stations that I've built because I've installed like 80 something stations at this point. And you keep track of how many species you've picked up. There's like a cool, I think there's a Lincoln sparrow. Um, yeah, which is a good bird in
Oh,
Georgia. You can
nice. Yeah, look
look
at
at that
that.
track that it made. Yeah, there's a nice clean track. It was tagged up in Maine, made its way through the Northeast, and found its way going down and eventually to Mexico. So whippoorwills, that's a good species that makes some really cool tracks. They don't
So,
like to cross the Gulf, so they'll go around Mexico.
oh,
You know.
that isn't some, looks like some may have.
Yeah, so you also have to take this all with a grain of salt because those points are between two known locations. So if it was picked up here and picked up here, it doesn't necessarily mean it took that straight line. It
Hmm.
just means it wasn't picked up anywhere else, which could be because there's a lack of stations or it just went around the stations because we don't have a perfect network. And so there's plenty of birds don't get picked up even though they're moving through areas. There's a lot of things that affect the signal and stuff like that. So this is by no means a perfect technology, but when it works, it's pretty cool. So like that bird that we see a line that goes across the Gulf of Mexico. My guess, you can see if it's going through Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and then sort of central Texas, the likelihood of it being picked up is pretty low just because there's so few stations in that area
Gotcha. So
that
some
are
of these could
active.
have just gone around further and just not been
Exactly.
detected.
Exactly.
So are
When you see a dotted line, that means that the distance and the timing is most likely that's indirect route. It's just saying,
so it's
hey,
like
it was picked up here.
sketchy. This is
Yeah.
sketchy.
But when
Okay.
it's a solid line, that means it was picked up like in a reasonable traveling distance or traveling speed and things like that. And like, oh yeah, it was picked up here at this time of the night and picked up here later. So
S-
it's a lot more.
Veracruz City, it's doing work. It's getting
It
all the
is.
whippoorwills.
And there's funnel points for a lot of these migrants, right? So we tend to choose to install stations that are these funneling points for a bunch of migrants. And that part of the east coast of Veracruz, I mean, there are so many birds, and especially like whippoorwills who they hug the coast a lot of times and go all the way down and winter somewhere in Mexico. They make those stations, yeah, they funnel in a whole bunch of birds. They work really well.
So are like all banding stations adding these radio tags to their birds then? So they can be part of this network, or is it only certain ones? And what do those radio tags look like?
Yeah. Oh man, I wish I had a picture of it.
We could probably pull one up.
Yeah, if you look up like a Motus nano tag, you see what that looks like. Um, they also still come in different sizes and different battery lengths, but a lot of them look the same. They have a small component uh that will either sit on typically on the back of the bird, and then it has an antenna that follows down the tail. So that antenna is what's sort of sending out its signal as it's, moving around. Um,
So is it like this one? The
yeah, like that.
okay.
Yep. And we have bigger ones and even smaller ones. Some that are solar powered. There are newer tags that are solar powered. And there are even uh, tags now on a Bluetooth frequency that are small enough to fit monarchs.
Oh
And
man, that's
they're
crazy.
like 3D printed and they just have a little solar cell and a tiny antenna. They're on the Bluetooth frequency, 2.4 gigahertz. And so this is something that, unlike the aluminum bands, it requires a little bit more permitting because we're now putting some kind of considerable, what we say considerable weight on the bird. And it's typically through, sometimes we glue it onto the back of the bird and they'll drop it off by the time the tag's dead when they molt in new feathers. Or oftentimes when we have tags that are going to live a year or 2 years long, we'll use leg loop harnesses where it's basically, think of like a climbing harness that wraps around your legs and then it sits on their back comfortably. That way, it doesn't impede in any way with their flight, with their movements and stuff like that. Um, and so, because this is like this is an added weight to the bird. We're very mindful of how we conduct this research. As cool as it would be to just tag every bird that we can. We want to tag birds with a purpose, right? We want to have a very specified question. We want to know that the technology that we're using can answer that question because sometimes it won't. Um, Sometimes Motus is not the thing that can answer specific questions depending on what it is we're answering, right? If we're interested in looking at local movements, we're talking about like, hey, I want to know how big of a breeding range or breeding area that a bird takes up. There's different tools to use for that question. And if I'm interested in knowing where are birds going for the winter, there's different tools for that. So essentially we have to think really critically about it because we're adding something to the bird. And so people who are deploying tags are typically in this big concerted effort to tag across a bunch of individuals. So like this wood thrush project is a great example. Uh, Sarah Kendrick with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, she's a biologist who basically brought together 20 some odd states and 5 other countries and said, hey, we're all going to put tags on wood thrush for 2024 and 2025. We're going to put out like 1,200 tags. And we're going to answer some really awesome questions about their connectivity or when they're migrating or, survival, all these different questions. And so everyone was all putting them all out at once, which is a really awesome way to do it. But there's still a lot of projects that are just, hey, I've got a banding station and I want to know where my birds are going. I've got a banding station and I want to know how long birds are stopping over for. So there's a lot of different questions that people use this for that can be applied.
Yeah, one that I know I got to go out and help with the Louisiana stuff was Red Knot. And the map for that is like you can tell there was some focus here on like let's see see where these things were going because that's a pretty comprehensive set of points there.
I'm glad you brought up red knots, and to listeners that we did not tee this up, but I was going to use red knots as an example because the other part of like why do we want to tag birds is we want like actionable items, and we want to actually influence conservation. I don't want to just know where birds go. I want to take that information and use it to actually conserve birds. And red knots is like my number one example that we use.
I mean,
Uh,
look at how far up some of these
yeah, no,
went,
I
and the
mean,
fact that you guys have stations up there is crazy.
well, that's an interesting. So those tracks are actually from satellite tags that's integrated into Motus,
Okay.
because red knots are big enough to use satellite tags as well.
Oh, nice.
But like I said, they just cost more, so you can't use nearly as many because you're all, typically grant funded and limited by how much money you have. But yeah, there's been big efforts to track red knots because it's a big declining species. And the thing about shorebirds, which is slightly nicer, like on the Atlantic coast, is typically we know they're following the coast, so you can set up a bunch of motor stations all along the way,
Mm.
and you're not like having to fill in this a whole bunch of area. You can like line it along the coast, so you get really, really good data. And the
Which it looks like
question,
worked pretty well.
yeah, I mean, look at that. I mean, the maps
Yeah,
are
it's
maps are
crazy.
crazy, and it gets really good data. And most of that data has been, cleaned and is very nice. And so, what some folks in South Carolina and Georgia wanted to know is, we have these red knots that are stopping over on our barrier islands,
Hmm.
um, and say 10 years ago, the prevailing thought was 90 some odd percent of red knots on the Atlantic coast, they all go up to the Delmarva Peninsula, somewhere around the Delaware Bay. So many red knot researchers thought this. It was like, yeah, they all go to there because that's where all the horseshoe crab eggs are. That is like the big hot spot. And then they'll make their way up to the tundra. And so these researchers in South Carolina were just sort of skeptical because they're like, man, we have red knots that stay here for what seems like a long time, but we don't really know because we can't track them. So they put out a whole bunch of Motus tags, and they had their own stations that were constantly listening, keeping track of the red knots to know where they were and how long they were staying. And what they found was there's actually a ton of red knots that stop over on South Carolina and Georgia for like 2 to 4 weeks. They fill up on horseshoe crab eggs and other invertebrates, like blue mussels and other things that they eat. And then they don't go up the Atlantic coast. They make a big straight shot right to the tundra. They go across the Midwest. They're passing, crossing over the Appalachians and they're going straight forward. They don't go to the Delmarva Peninsula. And so what this meant was that they actually had to protect those barrier islands more because they realized just how important it was. And that actually led to a whole bunch of legislation that sort of banned the harvest of horseshoe crabs
Mm.
for several barrier islands for the past few years. And it's led to like an immediate impact because of that research. And now it's like booming with shorebirds every year. It's just loaded up with food. And I mean, it doesn't affect just red knots. This is for plovers and sandpipers and whimbrel and all these species that use these barrier islands. So again, I thanks for bringing up red knots. You like read my mind. I mean, there's such a good example for this.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because I know they did a lot of work on the chandeliers, and I got to help them ban, and I knew they'd made a lot of discoveries. But yeah, it's pretty wild to what. And so are the different colors like separate groups?
Those are different projects.
Oh,
So
okay,
if you
cool.
look at the different color, when you select a certain species, you can go in project by project, and see what the different people do. So the way the data is organized, anyone who has their own project, which there's over 1,000 projects, at this point, now that it's about 10 years old. And you can see, you know, what all was deployed from that individual project. So you can see all those pink ones. That's
Yeah,
from the paper I'm referring to. All those
yeah,
pink
look at
ones were
that.
tags that were deployed back in, when was that? I don't know, the 2020. Well, that was a 2023 one. But maybe it was 2021. I think that's when a lot of those were deployed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm assuming there's tons of papers coming out of all this stuff too. It's good that like there's actual action being taken from
Yeah,
it,
I mean
but I'm
that's
assuming you
sort of the
could,
base.
yeah.
Yeah, like I said, there's plenty of people who are just interested in knowing where birds go. But for a lot of us, especially when it's not cheap to do all this, and it takes a lot of effort. And so every tag that we put out, we want to have some really useful information that can actually um, allow us to inform conservation efforts.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're interested in knowing all of the papers, if you go up to the very top, yeah, if you go to resources, there's basically they've organized it all. Documentation, motor stations.
I have a YouTube channel.
They do have a
Oh, I
YouTube
got
channel.
tutorials and stuff. Nice. Oh, there's an
There's
R package.
oh, there you go. Publications. There you go. Right there. And so you can go in and see, and they break it down even by ecology. Like you can break it up by
That's pretty cool.
whether it's about migration ecology or survival or whatever. There are several hundred papers that have used Motus. Now, like I said, Motus is now like 10 years old. It started in 2014, really got off the ground in like 2015, 2016, I think. Um,
I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it too much, at least where I'm at. So
yeah,
it's cool to learn more about it.
yeah, it depends, it depends on what sometimes it's really active with like Audubon groups supporting it. Sometimes it's not. Like I said, when I only started, at beginning of 2024, so I'm a little over 2 years in on this position now. And the Southeast was sort of a black hole. There's like no stations. Like
Hmm.
Georgia had like two stations, Alabama had none. Mississippi had like one or two. So ever since, the network has grown a lot. And I've also kind of got to make a lot of partners who have really gained a whole bunch of interest in getting the word out. So we're very much, it's funny. You go to certain places and it's very well known, and you go to other places and no one's ever heard of it. So, we're trying to do our best to get the word out there because we like partnering up with. I work with a lot of like local Audubon chapters who are interested in, putting up a station. So I'll go and help them do that, or they're interested in supporting some tagging work. So I like to see it as a very public. It's a very good outreach tool. They've made the website very user friendly, and it's all public, and this is stuff that people are interested in. And I think the thing that I like the most when it comes to this sort of stuff is giving you sort of a connection and an ownership to quote unquote your birds. When
Hmm.
we tag birds for like an organization or something, people who support that work, they feel like, yeah, they get to see the data from their birds. Those are my wood thrush. Those are my, swamp sparrows that are being tagged, and they have a connection. And then then they realize where they go, and then they realize, oh, maybe, we're sharing our time with these birds. They're not just ours. They also spend more time, honestly, like in Honduras or Costa Rica or Cuba or wherever it may be. So it kind of it's ownership, but also realizing that, birds know no bounds. They are shared by many places and many people, and that's sort of the cool thing that connects us all.
Yeah, and that like you talked about earlier, the protections in those places really matter. Because I remember listening to a presentation about cranes, and a lot of those that are in like, the eastern part of the world, they're really protected in certain places, but then they go into places they have no protection and they just
Yeah,
get slaughtered. They just get shot. So like it doesn't matter how protected they are in one place. It's like if the protections just fall apart, then it well like that's what matters more is, getting protection throughout the whole thing than just in one place. So
exactly. Exactly. Like you can't
it's a team
knowing
effort for
it's a
sure.
team effort, and it's a global effort.
It's yeah, for
And it's
sure.
not just, and a lot of times we think, oh yeah, where the bird is on the breeding grounds and where it spends the winter. But all that space in between is honestly just as, if not more important, because migration, I hate to tell your listeners, birds die in migration. That is a rough, migration is rough for a bird. The chances of them being able to survive their first year is not great, because you're asking a bird to travel hundreds, if not thousands of miles through terrain that they've never been through. They're gonna encounter, urban environments with windows that they collide in. They're gonna have to cross an ocean. They're gonna have to be able to keep enough fuel in their body to make it so that they make it to the tropics, or even just, the southeastern United States or wherever they're going, uh, to be able to have the resources to do that, to rest, to know where they're going. It's incredible that birds survive these journeys at all. And so it's just as important to protect all the stops along the way, right? All these stopover sites that they're using, that they're fueling up on, even if it's your backyard. That's again the whole, like,
Hmm.
connecting birds and our birds and their birds is you have to protect the whole way, just like you said, the whole way. If I protect it here just in one place, that's great, but if they're not making it everywhere else, then they're not coming back.
Yeah, I know that I don't know how off we are from this tech, but it would be cool to have like a really tiny lightweight camera on like the chest of a migratory bird,
Mhm.
so you could see its like migratory path.
That
I don't
would
know, maybe we're closer to that than I think, but I think that'd be really cool to, see where it all goes and the perils that they have to fight through and
I
all
would
that.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, it would probably be like, make its whole way and then would like hit a window or something and be really depressing.
I've been waiting to hear about, like, a tag bird found by someone, at a window collision strike, but I haven't heard of that. I'm sure it's happened. I don't know everything here, but yeah, that would be sad. That would hurt.
Yeah, but it would be really cool to see the migration path and just everything that they have to go through. Because I think to the average person, it's not something they really think about. They
Mhm.
look out their window and like, oh yeah, the birds are out there, but there's so much more going on than just that.
Yeah, my hummingbird's back. They
Yeah,
made
my
it.
hummingbird's back. Yeah,
They don't realize that they were flying at like 1,500 meters up in the air across the Gulf of Mexico,
yeah, their
like
migration. I
10
wish
minutes ago.
maybe look at one of those because their migrations are pretty crazy, especially for being so tiny. It's
Yeah.
kind of like the monarch migration. How
Hmm.
do those things get to where they need to go with how fragile they are?
I know. Yeah, honestly, there's, like I said, there's these recent these newer tags that are developed um that can fit monarchs that are showing some pretty incredible potential for Bluetooth tags. Um yeah, I mean, a monarch that that compared to a bird is lazily flapping uh and moving very slowly all the way down to Mexico from, like, New England. That is bewildering to me. Um, I'd try as my hardest, as much as I spend time looking at this data and doing this, to not, lose the awe in all of it. And sometimes, people might roll their eyes to that, but like I like want I never want to be like, oh yeah, those birds do that. That's whatever. I want to constantly kind of be surprised and shocked by the fact that they can do that because I couldn't be me. I could never do that.
So this is some of the Monarch data.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if
Mm.
it's relatively new because it doesn't look like it goes down too far.
Yeah, so some of those, I guess I would say there were some older frequency tags that's the data on Motus right now. So that the Bluetooth tags haven't been integrated. That data hasn't been integrated
Oh, okay. So
into
the
Motus
gotcha.
yet. It's a whole thing because it's this whole new type of tag and a whole new frequency. So it'll be a whole another step to add to integrate it all into this, but it's still all within the Motus sphere as we call it. But yeah, I mean, look at some of those tracks. Actually, one of those pink ones that goes through the spine in North Carolina and Georgia hit several stations that I installed this past year, and I was very happy that, that one was tagged up in New England, and yeah, again, just really, really cool to think about them.
So does this was Saturday, September 27th, 2025. Is it assumed that that Monarch probably didn't make it past this point?
No, so that it just wasn't picked up past then. And again, like um there's a lot of different reasons for that. Those tags that they're using, they only live like 3 weeks. They're
Oh,
very
okay.
short-lived tags. So the tag could have died, the Monarch could have died, but more than likely, it just wasn't picked up anywhere else. Because look,
Gotcha.
you can see when you look at Mississippi, Alabama, and like central Georgia, you see how the number of stations just kind of really just goes away. So more than likely, it was just a matter of it went through areas that don't have stations. And again, that
Gotcha.
this is all part of my job right now, right? Like working on strategically placing a whole bunch of new stations so that this black hole conundrum goes away, where birds aren't just arriving to the southeastern United States and then never being seen again.
Is there a density that you would like to achieve? Like one Motus tower per every distance?
I mean, if it's all tied to resources and time and money because like I said, these things are not cheap. Each station costs at minimum like $3,000 to $4,000.
Dang.
It's expensive equipment, unfortunately. And so we're limited to like where we have land access, existing structures to put them on, power, Wi-Fi. There's a whole bunch of different things that we kind of look for. So instead of thinking about like, okay, I just want to blanket the entire state of Georgia, what we do is we create what's called fences. So if you kind of zoom out a little, you'll see we've ended up building along the Georgia and South Carolina border.
Yeah, like
You
this
see,
line.
we build what's called a fence line, right? Where it's like, okay, we can't cover the entire state, but what if we put lines of them that are close enough to where if a bird's passing, it almost has to cross, it has to be picked up by one of these
Yeah.
stations. And so what we're doing is we've created that. We'll fill in sort of in the middle where we can. But then my other objective that I'll be working on a lot this next year is filling out the Gulf Coast there. So you can see like very far western panhandle of Florida, very few stations, which is a shame because a ton of migrants end up in West Panhandle of Florida to stop over and then jump across the Gulf of Mexico. So this upcoming year, we're going to be like filling that out. So again, we may not know in between that area, but they have to hit somewhere around there. Yeah, if
Why
you're
why
looking
are
at them,
some of these like so close together? Just like
well,
resources?
so the other thing is when you hover over them,
Hmm.
you'll see whether they say active or inactive. Those
Oh,
I
okay.
don't know why the Motus website still keeps up. So those are all inactive. Those were old ones that people would put up. Actually, a lot of those were probably put up for red knot stuff.
Gotcha.
Because there's cheaper versions that are what we call pop-up stations to just put it where you're gonna put out tags. So you want a station kind of listening and recording when birds are there and then when they take off. So they're pop-up, right? We put it up for a season and then we take it down. Uh,
Okay.
so that's what a lot of those. in the Panhandle. So most of those there in the Apalachicola forests are not they're not there anymore. Um, so like I said, I'm working on putting a whole bunch of new ones there. Yeah, and Louisiana is another one that I we will hopefully be working on in the future because there's a lot of empty spots because most of those stations on the along the coast they're not
Dude,
operating
Nichols
anymore.
needs one. What are they doing?
Hey,
What's up
let
with
an old
that?
professor know. Yeah, go reach out
Yeah.
to their old advisor. Let them know,
Tim Clay, if you're listening, go get a Motus tower.
Yeah, we actually work with a lot of universities because I mean it's
I mean,
great
it'd be cool for
research.
like a class to have your students be able to see, like, catch birds and then see where they're going and have them
Exactly.
write papers on the species or something. That'd be,
Exactly. It's
yeah.
like perfect for like yeah, undergrad research and or supporting actual, like grad PhD research as well.
Yeah. So in a perfect world, if you could change anything about this, like for your job, what would you choose? What's the biggest pain for you guys?
Uh it's I don't want to complain too much because I really enjoy my job and I love the fact that I get to be I've kind of dubbed myself research support. So I'm not the PhD student who has to develop the full project anymore and write up the paper, do the analysis anymore. I'm working on like helping 20, 30, 40 different research projects do their thing. Um, and so I get to do field work, I get to do tagging. I spend a lot of time building new stations. I'm working with partners, doing presentations. I kind of get to do a little bit of everything. The one thing that if I could change would be hire another one of me
Hmm.
because I spend a lot of time on the road. This past year, I logged over 13,000 miles because I had trips all throughout if you're looking at the website, almost all of the Florida stations I touched this year, I either revived them or built them new. I went out all the way to Texas. I cover from Virginia to Texas. I spent a lot of time in the mountains of Virginia this year, Kentucky, Tennessee, So I'm just on the road a lot because it takes a lot of time to do all this. I'm hauling a big trailer with all my equipment in it. And so I spend a lot of time on the road, which I enjoy because I get to really see really cool places. I keep a checklist at every station when I'm installing. And so I made my own eBird profile for just birds at Motus stations, like
Motus guy.
while I'm standing at the Motus towers. And it's built my Texas trip really, built it up pretty well.
Sure. Yeah.
So I get to see really cool places, but man, if we had the resources to be able to hire another one of me so that I didn't have to go to Texas and Florida and Virginia all within like 3 or 4 months, that would be that'd be my request. But that's just the way it is. We're lucky enough to have the resources that we do for all this stuff. So, you know, I can't really complain.
So do people just call and they're like, "Hey, we're having a problem with our tower. Can you come out and fix it?" Or like, "Can I get a new one?" Like that's pretty much what it's
I
like.
I am very much the customer support line for a lot of people. I've had people call me.
You got to answer it as bird support. And we're like, "Bird
I
support."
know. First,
Yeah.
no, and I don't know if this is just like I love being involved so much that I've told people like, hey, feel free to call me whenever you run into a problem, because up and when I started this position, there was not my position. So I'm the first kind of resource dedicated to this region. So people didn't really have this as a resource. So I like being that person that they call to, um, to answer questions at 8 o'clock at night or whatever.
They caught they're calling that late for
You
bird
know,
support.
I've had some late night calls where someone was working on a station and they needed some troubleshooting help and hey, I'm there, I
That's dedication.
gotta be there for them, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, bird support 101 as best as I can.
Cool. Well, that's awesome. Anything you want to tell us more about the Motus projects or like how people can get involved if they want to like set up a station. Decide call you at 8
Call
p.m.
me. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
call me. No, no, there's a lot of different ways to support Motus, either, contributing to Motus.org, or Birds Canada, or with the American Bird Conservancy. Like I said, we handle a lot. It's four of us holding down the fort for most of the U.S. Bird Conservancy of the Rockies is an organization that does a lot out west. There is, there are a lot of local, either state agencies that do a lot of the work. It's a big hodgepodge, right, of different people. So if you're interested in supporting it, reach out to your local Audubon chapter to see if they know of anyone. Look on Motus, see who's running those stations. And my biggest thing for people, my big message is that we're getting to a point with Motus where we have a really good network, and we're going to try to like shift our focus away from building, building, building to like, all right, we've built this for a reason. Let's do all these really cool projects. We have so many projects we want to do. I personally have a lot of really I've, 1,000 different ideas in my head that I'd love to see happen. It's just a matter of time and funding and stuff. So, there's plenty of opportunities to get involved there and support conservation work, and hopefully in the next few years I hope if people hadn't heard of Motus, I hope they will. I hope if this is their first exposure to it that, like I said, check out what stations are near you, see what birds are pinging near your stations, and see if there's any way to help with that. Yeah, that's my
Yeah,
message.
let us know in the comments if this is the first time hearing about it. I'd be curious to know. And then what bird, if you could pick any bird to track like this, with no restrictions, like, oh, we can't do that because of X, like what species would you be most curious to see tracked?
This might be just a bias because they're like my favorite bird, but yellow-billed cuckoos and
Mm.
black-billed cuckoos, probably both of the cuckoos. I think black-bills are a little more, even more mysterious, but the cuckoos, I want to know where they're going. I want to know their flight paths. That's a bird that is like, I think because they're just very hard to catch,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
people
I mean, they're
know.
hard to see. I can imagine they'd be hard to
Hard to
catch.
see. They stay up way, way high.
You got 10 tagged on the
I know.
Motus.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, there we go. Sweet.
It's a good start. Good start.
It's a good start. Yeah, if I was the world leader of Motus, I'd want to see where cuckoos go.
You're like, forget all the other birds, just tag the cuckoos. I mean, the data
Yeah.
is not that bad. It's not that bad.
That is surprising. Well, and the nice thing, the bigger the bird, typically the
The
better
harder they
quality
fall.
data. The higher quality the data, because that tag can live longer. You can send out more pulses, so it's a whole combination. But yeah, look at that.
That's not bad.
That's
Yeah.
pretty good. And they were tagged. Does that show that they were tagged in Wisconsin? Do you see that tagging?
Oh, let's see. Is it?
Right on the border, maybe?
No, we got that one.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah, where was that tagged? What is this? You
They
tagging
don't
sites.
always
Does
tell
it
you like
say?
the tagging site. Oh, that was part of the black-billed and yellow-billed cuckoo movement. Okay, I think that's either Illinois Natural History,
Hey, it's in our
maybe,
state
or
though.
yeah. I just know the project is with folks from Illinois. But
Dang.
yeah, I mean,
They're
look at
coming into our state, tagging our
look,
cuckoos.
I love it. Oh, yeah,
Well, that's
okay.
cool.
That's one of the black-billed cuckoos I got picked up at one of my Georgia stations.
This
Uh,
purple one or this?
I think that purple one, yeah.
So
If you
does it?
zoom,
They tagged three here, huh?
it looks like, yeah, it looks like they tagged four.
What happened to the other
I
one?
don't know why. I don't know why there's three colors there. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, you got this purple one, it looks
Yeah,
like.
yeah, yeah. Look
Yeah. Look at us working together.
at
And then he went all the way down to Costa Rica. What
Yeah,
a guy.
made it to Colombia. Yeah, wow, look at that.
That's
Oh,
cool.
that's some good data.
Neat. Cool, man. Well, I'd love to hear more about the other stuff you've been doing, but we might save that for like another podcast because it was cool hearing about the Moto stuff.
Yeah, no, I'd love to have another podcast sometime.
Yeah, well, make sure to check out motus.org to see all the data and go to the American Bird Conservancy website, see how you can get involved, see what they're doing in your area. And thanks everybody for watching and listening to this episode of the Badgerland Birding Podcast.